Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about AncestryDNA. Specifically, we're going to talk about some tips for identifying biological family members. Now, I've done a video about this before, but today I'm going to give you some basic principles to follow if you're looking for biological family members, and then I'm going to actually walk you through a case study of one of the ways in which I am doing this with one of my family members. Now, you don't have to be adopted for this to be useful information. It could be that your grandfather or your great-grandfather was adopted, or that you've got your DNA results and it turns out that the person you thought was your grandmother isn't really your grandmother. All of these principles can apply regardless of where in the process or where in the tree you fit. But specifically for those of you who are adopted or have adopted parents and you're using the AncestryDNA test to locate that biological family, you're going to find this hopefully useful information for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. We are going to just start with some basic principles. I'm going to give them all to you right up front, and then we're going to walk through the example. So let's just hop over here. Okay, here are kind of the 4 basic steps that I use when I am using the DNA results to identify biological family. The first thing I'm going to encourage all of you to do is to start a tree and to connect your DNA results to that tree. Now, of course, those of you who are looking for biological family are saying, but I don't know my family tree, that's the whole point. Well, I'll show you in a minute what I've done. But the idea is you want to get your DNA results connected to a tree so that other people who match you don't just discount you right out of the gate. So that they can see, oh, look, this person has a tree with 6 or 8 or 10 or 15 people in it, rather than they have no tree at all. The second reason it's important to start a tree is because you're going to be identifying common ancestors with your cousin matches, and you want to be able to attach those people to a tree so that you can see what other things start to happen, what other shared ancestor hints you get, what other DNA circles or new ancestor discoveries you might be given as part of that process. And if you have your DNA results attached to a tree, it's going to allow all of those automated tools to work a little bit more in your favor. Now, I know that there is a little bit of a movement afoot among some of the search angels and some of the people who work with adoptees to create what we call mirror trees, and then to attach those DNA results to switch them from tree to tree to tree. I would strongly discourage against that particular process. You can create one tree and add all of that mirror tree information or all the information about the ancestry of your matches into one tree. And then you can just attach and detach different sets of parents or grandparents or great-grandparents to the tree so that you can automate that same process. But the idea is you always want to leave your DNA results attached to one tree, because if you detach your results and then reattach them, your whole tree has to go back into the queue for re-indexing, and sometimes it takes a while for it to work its way through that process. Ancestry now has 1.4 million DNA customers in our database, and that is growing every day. And so that process gets a little bit longer and a little bit more computer intensive the more people test. And so it's easier just to leave your test attached to yourself in one tree and then to attach and detach relatives in that tree rather than attaching and detaching your test. Now, I'll show you the screens to do that here in just a minute. Let's move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is just a reminder that the most success that you're going to have is going to be found in the third cousin range and closer. Now, if you don't have any third cousins or closer, you'll have to work with what you have. But once you get into that fourth cousin range, things get a little bit more difficult. Fourth cousins typically have a set of third great-grandparents in common, so great-great-great-grandparents. And so we're looking at a couple that may have lived 200, 220 years ago and having to trace all of their descendants in order to locate potential candidates for the biological parents of the individual. And so it just gets a little trickier, it gets a little bit more complicated. So if you've got those third cousins or closer, we're going to focus on those. Once you've identified a common set of ancestors among those third cousins and closers, then the next step is to trace the descendants, looking for potential candidates for biological parents. And some of you have identifying or non-identifying information. So you have information like about how old that parent was when the adoptee was born, about maybe where that individual was born. So you have some of that non-identifying information. Some of you are going on very, very little or nothing. And so it's just a matter of looking at time and place and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And then the kind of the final step before we start reaching out to living people is that once you've identified potential candidates, then you're going to trace their pedigree. So you're tracing descendants from a common set of ancestors to a potential candidate. Then you're tracing the pedigree of the potential candidate and looking for the same surnames among your matches. And that after step 4 is where we get to the point where we can start contacting, hopefully with some sensitivity, some living people, and seeing if we can get other people in the family to test to verify our hypothesis. So let me just walk you through a case study that I've been working on. And this one is not solved yet, but we are getting actually pretty close. And hopefully this will help you understand what I'm talking about. So this is the husband of one of my cousins, and he has taken the DNA test. Now, he was adopted, but he was able to find out who his biological mother was. She passed, 30 some odd years ago now. But so we had the information about his maternal side of the family. So we know her name, we know her parents' names, we know the name of one of her sets of grandparents. We do not know the name of the other set of grandparents. I could build that out a little bit further if I wanted to do that research, just to have that in the tree. But there's something really unique about this particular individual. When my cousin took the test, his DNA was split almost 50-50, which I've never seen before, 50% Eastern European and 50% Irish. Well, his mother's parents are both Hungarian, and so that's the 50% of Eastern European. And there's probably not going to be a ton of DNA matches on his mother's side of the family because they're recent immigrants within just a couple generations here. And Ancestry has not yet opened up in Eastern Europe. And so any matches he would get from his biological mother's side of the family are either going to be, like her nieces and nephews if any of them get tested, or if any of the descendants of her grandparents also immigrated to the United States and we just aren't aware of them. So this Eastern European ethnicity here and this side of the family we're probably not going to have to deal a whole lot with. Now, because his ethnicity was so cleanly split 50-50, now we know that we're probably looking for a group of Irish descendants or Irish immigrants on this side of the family, on his paternal side of the family. So he has this unknown parent. I just put in a birth year of 1930. He could be younger. He could be much older. We don't really know, but I put that in kind of as a placeholder for myself, just so that I knew that I was looking for somebody who's probably around that age, not much younger, based on the birth year of the biological mother and the birth year of my cousin. Could be older than that, but that gives me kind of an idea generationally of what I'm looking for or looking at. Now you notice then I added unknown grandparents and unknown great-grandparents, and I did that again very intentionally because I want anyone who looks at this match to see it and say, this tree has so many people in it, and then when they come in and actually look at the tree, they can see, well, this person, it's not that they just didn't put up a tree, it's that they don't know half of their ancestry. They have no idea. And so I find that when I see that on somebody's tree, I'm more inclined to help them or to help them make those connections. Now, under settings on your DNA homepage, if you click that button, you're going to see a section called Family Tree Linking. And if you have not yet, that's where you're going to link your DNA test to yourself in your tree that you've created. Don't link it to somebody else in the tree. That confuses you and others. Remember, DNA is a collaborative thing, and you may think, oh, well, I'm just doing this for myself, or I'm the only one who can see this. Well, you're not. All of your matches can also see that connection, and if you want them to help you, you need to keep it clean. So link your tree to yourself, and then people will be able to see this information. Excuse me. Okay. So then I'm going to pull up this list of his matches. Now I've grayed out the names for privacy's sake, but you can see here he has a parent-child connection, and that's because his son actually took the DNA test as well. So, it's easy to get really excited, and you have to remember, oh wait, that's not his father, it's his son. And so we have that there just for comparison's sake, also just for curiosity's sake. He was just interested in taking that test. Now, he did have a second cousin match that popped up. There's only one of them, but a second cousin match is good stuff. Now, this second cousin match has no family tree. You'll notice that on several of these people. But always click through to the match and check. Sometimes it's not that they don't have a tree. Sometimes it's that they just haven't attached their tree yet to their DNA results. And there's a lot of reasons that happens. Sometimes it happens because they have multiple trees and they weren't sure which tree to attach it to. Like if they created a tree for their mom's side, a tree for their dad's side, they didn't know which side of the, they don't have one tree to attach it to, and so there was some confusion. Sometimes people say it says they have no tree, and it's because they took the DNA test and then they started a tree. And so when you activate your kit, there's a process that actually walks you through attaching it to the tree. But if you didn't create the tree till after that process, they just may not know how to attach it. And so maybe that's something you could send them a message about. If you click through to your match and you see they have a tree, then maybe you can just send a message and say, hey, I noticed you have a tree. If you attach your DNA results to your tree, then here's how you do that. Then we can all work a little bit easier with the automated tools to see how we connect. Now, some people you click through and they have no tree, and it's because they actually have no tree. In my cousin's case, this particular individual that is his second cousin match, and we were so excited about it, sent her a message, and ultimately turns out she is also adopted. So she is looking for her biological family. My cousin is looking for his biological family, and they are the most closely related out of any of each other's matches. So it was a little bit frustrating, but we are making headway. Okay, then he has this set of third cousin matches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 third cousin matches, and then below that is those fourth cousins. Now, like I said, I would focus on the third cousins and closer, but those fourth cousins are going to come into play, and you'll see how here in just a minute. So I've got these third cousin matches, and you'll see that on all of them there's a little bit of a range as well as the category label. Then when you actually click through to the match, you have this little I here next to the confidence level. If you click that, it will tell you exactly how many centimorgans of DNA are shared between the individual and the match. So in this case, she's under the second cousin category, but she shares 444 centimorgans of DNA. And if you click what does that mean, or if you go to the ISOG, ISOGG, ISOG wiki, it's the International Society of Genetic Genealogists, they have a chart where you can look it up, and it just says that if you share that much DNA, it actually means that you're probably first cousins once removed. Okay, so what that means is that either she and my cousin's parent are first cousins, or my cousin and one of her parents are first cousins. So I don't know who's in the older generation at this point, but I know that with this much shared DNA, I'm likely looking at a first cousin once removed, not a second cousin, okay? Now, the other thing that I paid attention to in this particular case is the ethnicity, the shared ethnicity information over here. This particular individual has very little, she has a trace of Eastern European, but her large regions are going to be Europe, West, and Ireland. And remember, my cousin is 50-50, Irish and Eastern European. And so this match very likely connects on his paternal side of the family because we know his mother is a first-generation American of Eastern European parents. So the ethnicity in this case might give us some additional clues or lead us in a particular direction. Now, when I'm viewing the match, I also want to make sure that I click on shared matches. And this is where some of those third and fourth cousins are going to start to coalesce into groups. So here, under shared matches with this individual, this first cousin once removed, we see a parent-child relationship here. Well, that's my cousin's son, okay, so she matches him as well. And then one of the other third cousins also matches. Well, then I click on that third cousin match here, and I click on shared matches, and the list grows, okay? So one of the things that tells me is my cousin has more DNA in common with this third cousin match than the second cousin has with this third cousin match. And so that might be an indication or a clue that he is in the closer generation. So that's the theory that I'm working with right now, is that my cousin, and this second cousin match of his are first cousins once removed, and that one of her biological parents is his first cousin, which means that he and her parent share a set of grandparents, okay? So it's really close, but remember, she's adopted. So what I have to do then is I have to use the trees of these individuals, these third cousin matches, this fourth cousin match, and see if I can't come up with a common set of ancestors. Now remember how I said some people say they have no family tree, but when you actually click through, they do have a tree. And so in a couple of these cases, they actually did have trees. Some of those trees were very small. They just had 4 or 6 or 8 people in them. And so I had to actually build a tree for that person. I just did that in my cousin's tree. I just created a person, started building their tree. So I've got this person now in the tree, and I'm building out their ancestry, trying to see if I can find common ancestry between this third cousin match and this third cousin match. And eventually, you're going to start to make some of those connections. So here's another thing that I do, and I do this usually on scratch paper. I have lots of what we call little DNA circles, basically, that I've created out of the information that I have available. So here's my cousin. Here's that first cousin once removed match. She matches this individual, okay? And so the 3 of them all match each other. And then this individual also matches the 2 of them. Well, these 2, AC and MH, both have trees. And according to the shared amount of DNA, they are both second cousins once removed to my cousin. And so what I'm looking for likely, based on what I've projected about the ages of these 2 individuals, is that they are a generation older than my cousin, and he is a generation older than this second cousin match, okay? And so what I'm looking for then likely is a common set of great-grandparents between the 2 of these people, and that's going to be the great-great-grandparents of my cousin and the great-great-great-grandparents of this match. So that's the hypothesis that I'm working on. So what I've done then, once I identified that common set of great-great-grandparents for my cousin, is I just drop them in the tree. And it doesn't matter where you put them. The point is just to get them in the tree and to start to build their ancestry and to start to connect with some of the automated tools, the shared ancestor hints, and some of those things that you can work with a little bit easier. So I just took this common set of ancestors, okay? So that couple is her great-grandparents, and they're her great-grandparents, and so I put them in a spot that is on his tree in the great-great-grandparent generation, and you can see them there. Now, he has 2 other groups of cousin matches that I've been able to identify, but they're another generation back. So you can see here, one here, and then there was one here, and I think I've been able to identify, to pull it down another generation. So I just plug them in the tree wherever. Now, ultimately or eventually, I might have to rearrange these people based on the actuality of the relationships as I get closer. But for now, doesn't matter where in the tree they are. Remember, my DNA is still attached to him, and so I'm just adding and moving people around back here at this level, building their trees out so that I can take advantage of some of those shared ancestor hints and seeing what else I can discover. Now, for the next step, I've identified this common ancestor couple. In this case, it's this Thomas Cummings and Catherine Coggins. Both of them are of Irish descent. They both ended up in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, which is not far actually from where my cousin was born. And they had a whole slew of children here. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children. You'll see an 8th child listed there, and that's actually the dummy child that I needed to create in order to attach them to the tree. So they really didn't have 8 children, they really had 7 children. And eventually what I'm going to do, once I determine which one of their children is likely the ancestor, then I will just merge this dummy child with the correct child in the family tree. And just keep working it, and you're just working down one generation at a time. So what I've done with each of the children of Thomas and Catherine is I have traced their descendants. So I have researched their lives to determine if they married, if they had children, just researched their lives really well. And I have just started using little icons as images to attach to help keep them straight for me. So in this case, this oldest child, Richard, he did live, a fairly long life. He lived to adulthood, but there is no indication that he had any children. Now, he could have fathered a child. He could have fathered a child that was given up for adoption. He could have fathered a child and not even known about it. But all indications that I currently have state that he had no known children. And so I just put a little, it's a picture of 2 children with a slash through it. It's the icon I've chosen for that. Now, some of these matches, Mary and John, for example, the other DNA matches connect through these lines. And so I know that this person cannot be the ancestor of my cousin, because then he would be more closely related to those DNA matches. And so I just have a little DNA symbol with a line through it, so that I know that there's a DNA connection, but that it is not the line through which my cousin descends. And then as I start coming up with possibilities, here's this Thomas's son Thomas had several children who had children who had children who were in the right time in the right place. And remember, in my case, I'm looking for a biological father, so I know what gender I'm looking for, and I know in what generation I'm looking. And Thomas has descendants who fit that category. And so I just put a little DNA icon as a note to myself that there is a possibility that Thomas is the ancestor. Now, I still have to finish researching this family. I need to research Patrick, and I need to research Edward and come to a conclusion about that. And if Thomas ends up being the only one, well, then what I'll probably do is start contacting some of Thomas's descendants, living descendants, and just letting them know that I am doing work for an adoptee, that adoptee is related to their family, and that we're trying to figure out how and see if they would be willing to take a DNA test to help us. And you have to be really sensitive about that conversation, particularly if you suspect at all that the individual that you're contacting could be the biological parent or sibling or grandparent of the individual that you're working with, or that, or yourself if it's you doing the work. And so you have to be really sensitive to that. And I usually just try to couch it in the context of the family, unless I have a degree of certainty that I could be actually speaking to the biological parent. Particularly if I have multiple family lines that are possibilities, I can say that with a little bit more certainty that it's in the family, but I'm not certain where. And then just inviting other people to DNA test to be able to draw that closer a little bit. Now, there is one other step that you can take that will give you a little bit more certainty. So in this case, for example, I've identified Thomas as the potential, one of the potential children in this family that could be remember, so Thomas here, then Thomas Jr. would go here in this spot. And that means I'm looking at the potential great-grandfather of my cousin. And so then I would trace Thomas's ancestry or pedigree. So here's a potential candidate for the biological father. Here's Thomas Jr., here's Thomas and Catherine, that common ancestor couple among the matches. And so I've got now Thomas Jr.'s wife, and her parents' names, and their son John and his wife and her parents' names. And you'll notice lots of Irish happening here on all lines, which is consistent with what we know about his genetics, that we're looking for a biological father who is likely 100% Irish. And so we start, kind of looking for some of these other surnames. And then what I would do is I would go into my cousin's DNA matches, click on that search matches button, and start plugging in some of these other surnames, right? We already know that Cummings and Coggins are represented in his matches, but what about Brady or Egan or Gallagher or Flanagan? Do any of those names come up over and over, particularly in that fourth cousin range? And that's where those fourth cousin matches start to have some real significance, is if you start seeing some matches there, well, then maybe it's time to trace some of these people back another generation or two and see if you can't find another set of common ancestors. And if you do, you could be on the right track. Now, there's some families where there's a lot of intermarriage, and so you may end up with, a family on this side that intermarried with a family on this side on multiple lines, but it's certainly something worth exploring. So that's the process that I use. And like I said, I've been working on this case with my cousin, and now I've contacted that second cousin match who is also adopted, and she has given me permission to work on her family at the same time. And I'm hoping that if I identify, some of her matches, then I know whether I'm looking at her father or mother to be the first cousin of my cousin. Starts to, all of this information starts to gel into specific times and locations, people of a specific generation. So here's just one more time is the process that I use. Start a tree. Even if you don't have any clue who any of your biological parents are, start a tree and put in unknown and connect your DNA results to that tree, so that as you start looking at those third cousins and closer, as you start identifying common ancestors among them, then you can plug those people into the tree and see what falls out. See if you get any shared ancestor hints. See if you start to see some of those same surnames popping up among your matches. Once you've identified a set of common ancestors, trace their descendants. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is not too long ago, people used to have really large families. And so it could be possible that you're tracing 10, 12, 14 children in a family. Sometimes you end up with 2 or 3 of those who died as children or did not have children, so you can rule them out. Sometimes you end up with people who their families did not have any children. So they may have had children, but then those children may not have had any children. So you can rule them out. You just start working through those descendants one generation at a time, keeping in mind that you're looking for people who are in the right generation, in the right time, at the right place to be the candidate for that biological parent. And in some cases, you even know what gender you're looking for. In the case of my cousin, we know we're looking for a male born probably sometime between 1900 and 1930, and probably living somewhere in Pennsylvania, though not necessarily. He could be living elsewhere and have been passing through town, if you've got people in the military, or if you've got somebody who's born at a time of military conflict or high in, enlistment numbers around the country. You've got lots of different historical factors that play into that you need to keep in mind. But sometimes you can narrow it down to a pretty good profile of the individual that you're looking for as you look for those potential candidates. And then, of course, once you've identified those potential candidates, you want to trace their pedigree and then search your matches for other people with those same surnames to give you some higher degree of confidence that this is really a potential candidate. And then you can contact that person or that person's children or siblings to see if they would be willing to test to get you closer to the information that you're looking for. Well, hopefully that was useful information for all of you. Again, whether you are an adoptee looking for your biological parents, whether you just took the DNA test and discovered that the person you thought was your grandmother was not your grandmother, or whether you've always known that your grandfather was adopted and you're looking to find out who his biological parents are, these steps still work. And so I would encourage you to just take the time to dig into your matches a little bit more closely, reach out to them, send messages. Those of you who have taken the test, check your messages, respond to messages. If we communicate with one another, it makes it a lot easier. But not everybody wants to communicate, and we have to recognize that. A lot of people take the DNA test for different reasons, but we're happy to work with the data that we have and make some of those connections. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.